Hollow Man 2 perhaps commits the biggest crimes in franchises. Not in that it doesn't need to exist, which, well, it doesn't, but in that it obviously had the right idea. It somehow feels like there is a better, more well-made movie hiding beneath the surface. It just didn't have the soul or the budget to pull it off. Let's take a look at what makes Hollow Man 2 a franchise flogged. It's a typical direct-to-video sequel, different cast and different characters, just the idea or theme of the Invisible Man to link them. The first film, while not a critical success, did find an audience who appreciated it, particularly for their special effects work. It starred the likes of Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth Shue and Josh Brolin, and centred around an already narcissistic scientist who found the secret formula to turn himself invisible, who then gets seduced by the power and abuses it. Calling it deep would be a stretch, but it did show us, in excruciating bone muscle kind of detail, what happens when you give a super jerk a superpower. It was, at its core, a slasher movie with a $100 million VFX budget, and it showed. The second one? Yeah, not so much. It had zero interest in science or psychology for that matter. It's in no way an expansion on the premise, and despite the title, barely a continuation by the whole Riser Institute thing. Which is a little surprising considering it's based on the first version of the original Hollow Man film. It's actually impressive it manages to be this disconnected. This time around we're dropped into the story when the invisible has already been done. The Hollow Man this time is a Delta Force soldier no less. He goes by the name of Michael Griffin. He's played by Christian Slater, but barely. More on that in a bit. He volunteered to become the first subject for a new Invisible Man project. There were risks involved and he'd been promised he'd been well looked after and then, well, he wasn't. Turns out one of the risks was death. He was promised regular injections to stop that happening and he never got them, so now he's angry about it all, and fair enough. He says about looking for one of the original doctors to help him get his injections. People don't want him to get his injection and, well, that's it. If he wasn't invisible, then it'd be nothing you haven't seen before. I guess because he is invisible, you still can't see it. Sorry, I'll stop now. But seriously, it just boils down to another military conspiracy where a soldier is done wrong and he sets off helping himself to some vengeance. Acting? Melodrama at its finest for the most part. Christian Slater is the biggest name here. Not that you get to see him that much, and that isn't a joke or a pun. You get to physically see him on screen for maybe 10 minutes. The rest of the time he's invisible and it could be anyone behind that voice. And not even his voice sometimes. At one point he has a pivotal conversation with the scientist he's trying to get help from, and you only hear her side of the conversation.
Heather? Who is this?
You can't help but wonder how much time the film's biggest star actually appeared on set. Seriously, it won't surprise me to learn he did most of the work in a film or voiceover between better jobs. But anyway, Laura Reagan plays a scientist of interest. She does a decent enough job as does Peter Fancianelli, who's trying to protect her, but they're both ultimately one-note performances. By the time we get to the end of the film, it's all quite predictable. You'll have guessed what's going to happen long before you get to see it. I won't ruin it, but take that as permission not to engage your brain if you ever do watch it. I wish I could say the effects save the day or something, but they really don't. The effects are where the budget gap really shows. They use practical stuff, which I respect in theory, but it's laughable in execution. The lowest moment? When Griffin transforms. They literally use footage from the first film. Not a homage and not a stylistic callback, just footage from a better movie, dropped in because they couldn't afford their own. If you get the chance to watch the making of the documentary, Christian Slater is dressed in his green screen outfit. The idea was to make him visible, but they didn't have the budget.
Clearly I am in character, you see? Ooh, floating hand, weird.
Well, at least they admit it. And that's why I'm being hard on it. At some point they must have realised they didn't really have the money to do the film or the concept justice, and they did it anyway. In the first film, Sebastian Cain was terrifying because he was a narcissist who lost his final tether to humanity. In this one, Michael Griffin is just a disgruntled employee. There's no progression and no escalation of the concept. Hollow Man 2 is a perfect example of just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Making a sequel to Hollow Man was always going to be a strange one. It was a one and done film. It was never setting itself up to be anything else. It knew that, the audiences knew that. So, Hollow Man 2, unseen, unnecessary and entirely transparent. Anyways, I've been Paul and Hollow Man 2 was a franchise flogged. If you've liked this video, then do me a favour and drop me a like. Subscribe as well if you want while you're there. Oh, don't, I'm not going anywhere. And hopefully I shall catch you on the next rewind. Thanks for watching.